I'm Yvette. Welcome to my sewing space. I love to sew. I love to sew with Jalie patterns, and as a result, I'm actually a Jalie Creative Ambassador, which means I get to sew with Jalie patterns a lot. So lately, I've been teaching a class using this particular pattern. This is Laurent, which is a hoodie and a tee. You get both versions in the one pattern. What I really like about this pattern, other than the fact that it's quick and easy one to sew, is I love its kangaroo pockets. I love the cuffs on the bottoms of the sleeves, and I love the hood. I also love that it comes in 28 sizes, which means I can make one for everyone in my family without having to buy another pattern. So in this class that I'm teaching, we decided to hack it a little bit, so we added a few things. So I added a front zip, making it much easier to get in and out of. And I also added some neck binding. You don't need neck binding when it's a pullover because you can't see the seam, but once you add a front zip and you unzip it just a little bit, it shows, and this is an attractive finish that you could actually use in other garments as well. So in order to do the front zip hack, I had to alter my pattern a little bit, so I'm going to show you what I did. Come on over to my workspace. You'll hear a funny sound as the camera moves. And here we are. So let's start with the bodice. I've joined piece A1 and piece A2 along the join line. Piece E, which is the hemband, I have folded in half. On both of these pieces, I marked the seam line, which is 1/4 of an inch in from the edge, or 6 millimeters. Once I've done that, I place one right on top of the other on the seam line, and I stick a pin in it so that it stays put long enough for me to measure it. So I'm doing this so that I can determine what length of zipper to put in. So I measure from the center front at the neck down to the bottom of the fold of the band, and on my pattern here it's 20 inches. So I have to make some alterations in order to get it to fit a zipper. Zippers come in 2-inch increments. They're measured from the top of the slider to the bottom where they join up. So this particular zipper, my example, is a 16-inch. I don't want, when I put the zipper in, I don't want the teeth to come right to the very top of my neckline. And if I put a 20-inch zipper in this garment as it is, that's exactly what would happen. And you'll see me in a future video that I had to sew through the zipper teeth, and it was not a pleasant experience. So I need to alter my front so that it is 3/4 of an inch longer than the zipper that I plan to put into it. Because I want, when I sew it in, I want this fabric to be pretty well even with the top of the neck, so that when I sew across here to put my hood on, I'm not running into those teeth. So I need to alter this front so that it's 3/4 of an inch longer than the zipper I plan to use. So what I'm going to do, the next go with this pattern, is I'm going to use an 18-inch zipper. So I'm going to remove a little bit off the bottom here so that my finished length from front to the bottom of the band is 18 3/4 inches. Another change that I had to make was the hood. Let's move this out of the way and we'll put the hood piece here. The original pattern is designed to be put in a round neck opening, and it overlaps. It overlaps at center front, and that's where this notch at the bottom is designed to. When you overlap it, you put one notch over the other notch and stick a pin in it before you sew it into the neck opening. But because we're putting a zipper in, and I have accommodated the extra width in the front to accommodate the extra width here, all we have to do is add 1/4 inch from the notch for seam allowance. And you can see I've drawn the lines on here. I drew a line matching up with my notch, and then I added 1/4 inch. So then I'll just fold in the excess, and I'll use it to cut my pattern or to cut my fabric. So let's get to sewing, shall we? So at this point now, I've got my hoodie cut out, and I've got quite a bit of the sewing done. joined my shoulders, I've put on the pocket, I've put my sleeves in, put my cuff on, and I've put the cuff or the hemband along the bottom. Then what I did was I drew a line up the center front on the wrong side from the top all the way down to the bottom, including the band. With my sewing machine, I sewed a scant 1/4 inch on each side of the line, and then with my scissors, I cut it open right up the front. So what that does is it makes it so much easier than putting on 2 half pockets. And putting on a half a band and a half a band. So this saved me a lot of time. So now I'm ready to put my zipper in. So I'm going to turn my jacket or my hoodie right side out. And I have my zipper, and I've applied basting tape to both sides of my zipper, and it's not sticking very well. I'm wondering if the zipper tape has a little bit of some sort of a film on it that it's not sticking very well. But anyway, let's keep going. So I'm going to sew the one side of the zipper. So I'm sewing the top edge or the right hand side of my zipper with right sides together. And I'm going to take off the paper. I can hear a cat wanting to get into my sewing room here. He can't stand it when I don't let him in. Come on. There we go. Okay. So I'm peeling off the paper. It's still coming off the zipper tape. But I'm lining up the bottom first. So the edge of the bottom of the zipper is even with the bottom of my hemband, and the edge of the zipper tape, I'm pressing it down so that it is even with the raw edge that I just cut. So I'm going to continue pressing on this all the way up. I'm going to put a few pins in to hold it, and then I'll meet you back at my sewing machine and I'll show you how I sew this in. Okay, so now we're over here at the sewing machine. I've got my zipper pinned in on one side. I have a straight stitch selected on my sewing machine. Now I've shifted my needle over 3 steps towards the left, and I'm going to begin to sew. So as I'm doing it, I don't sew over pins. I am going to do a back stitch. And away I go. So you can see I've got a little bit of space between my zipper foot and the teeth of the zipper. This is where the pocket and the hemband are joining together here. It was a bit of a thick spot. You could hear it struggling. So I'm going to sew all the way up to the top and do a back stitch when I get to the top, and then I'll meet you back at the sewing table, at the cutting table. So one side of my zipper is sewn in. What I neglected to tell you was that when I came to the zipper slider, I stopped with my needle down, raised my presser foot so that I could move the slider beyond where I was sewing so that I didn't have to try and go around it. So now what we want to do, before we start sewing in the other side of the zipper, we want to make sure that there's a couple of places that have to match perfectly. And one of them is right here at the hemband. We want them to join up just absolutely perfectly. So what I'm going to do on the wrong side of the zipper, I'm going to make a little chalk mark on the zipper tape so that I know where that spot is. Another spot that has to match absolutely perfectly is the top of the pocket. So again, I'm folding it over here and I can make a chalk mark where that has to match. Now I can peel the other side of my double-sided basting tape, take the paper off, and it's not sticking to the zipper tape very well either, but it's coming. Come on, stick baby, stick. Okay, now we want to stick it. I'm going to actually unzip it. to make it a little bit easier. There's where I want it to go. So with the right side of the zipper down, I'm putting it on top. There's my chalk mark for where the bottom band is. And here's my chalk mark for where the top of the pocket is. And so now I can stick my zipper down all the way up to the top, and then I can sew that side in. And I don't think you need to watch me do that, so I'll meet you back here after I get both sides sewn in. So I've sewn up the other side of my zipper. I've done it up to make sure that my lines match. So I have not top stitched the zipper. I do that after I attach the hood. So at the top, I've got my zipper just the way it was sewn in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to, with right sides together, I am going to find my right side. I'm going to lay the edge of the hood even with the zipper tape or the zipper teeth, and then I'm folding the zipper teeth over the edge of the hood. So I'll bring it a little closer to the camera. So the zipper and the hood, so the zipper is wrapped around the edge of the hood like that, and I'll put a pin in it, and then I'll pin the rest of the hood all the way around the neckline, doing the same thing at the other end, and then I'm going to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew it in place. Okay, it's time to sew the hood in. So now I have a confession to make. My zipper is too long. So I did not follow my instructions. I actually put the zipper or planned all of this and had it cut out before I had nailed down the final bit of the alteration instructions. So I'm going to have to go very carefully over the zipper teeth. And so press your foot down. I'm going to walk my sewing machine across the zipper teeth. Whoops, sorry, I didn't mean to hit the camera, because I don't want to break my needle. That is not fun. So my camera's still lined up. Yeah, good. Okay. So I'm over the zipper teeth. So now I can start to sew. So when I pinned it on, I matched the notches. And I'll just work my way around. When I came to the shoulder seam, my shoulder seam is open. But if I had serged it, it would have just gone towards the back. Just feeling a little bit of thickness there. Okay, we're good. And now I'm sewing all the way around. Not to bump the camera as I sew. It's kind of a difficult or awkward position. There's my other shoulder seam. So you can see how I have the zipper fabric and the zipper wrapped around the edge of the hood. Making sure I have no ripples. So I'm going to have to be very careful again when I come to the zipper teeth. Do not want a catastrophe here. Okay, a couple more stitches, and then I'm just going to walk my sewing machine over the zipper teeth. Same thing, I want to make sure that it's secure, so now I'm going backwards. And there we go. You can tell when you're meeting resistance, and then you can just ease it over a little bit one way or the other. Okay, a couple stitches to hold it, and cut my thread. So now when I unfold it, I'll be able to top stitch my zipper. I'll show you here after. So there's what the edge looks like with the zipper peeking out. So, but before I top stitch that, I want to try a kind of an edge finish on the neckline, on the seam allowance here to make that neck look a little bit neater. So I'm going back to the cutting table. So here's what it looked like when I sewed it. We had this wrapped around the edge of the hood. Before I cut anything off, I'm just going to turn it to show you with a closer view how it looks. So you can see on the inside, that's the excess zipper tape sticking out, which I am going to trim off. But from the inside, you can see how neat this join is. So now what I'd like to do, turning it back the way it was, I'd like to finish off this neck seam. So I cut a piece of lycra, which is like swimsuit fabric, and what I propose to do is to sew it with the good sides together along the edge of the seam, with raw edges together, right along the original seam line. And then I'm going to turn it to the inside. I'm going to top stitch it and then trim off the excess. So I'm at the sewing machine. I'm putting on the binding. I'm stretching it just slightly, and I'm just keeping my raw edges even along the right-hand side. Keep going, and I'll show you how far I'm going along this when I get near the zipper here. So when we look over here, I don't want to go all the way to the end because it's going to get tucked in anyway, but I want to overlap just a wee bit where the front has overlapped the hood. So stretching it just a little bit and putting my finger so that I know how far I want to go. And then I'm reversing and cut my thread. So I'm going to just trim that off. I don't know if these little snips will cut it or not, but I want to trim it just beyond the stitching here. They're not best for cutting fabric, they're more for threads. But you can see here that it's about 1/4 of an inch in on to the zipper tape. So now what I need to do is to turn it to the right side. Whoops, sorry, that was rude of me. Okay, it's difficult to sew with a camera in your face. I'm going to trim off this zipper tape. So you see I've cut it off. I'm going to turn this binding to the other side, and now I'm going to stitch in the ditch right beside where I sewed it before, and I'm just turning it with my fingers as I go. You could pin it if you wanted. I'm not much of a pinner. I tend to trust my fingers to do the job. And then when I get finished, I'm going to trim off the extra. So I'll meet you back at the cutting table. Okay, so the binding's being sewn on. So when I sewed it on the first pass, it was done with the hood up. And then when I turned it, there's what I've got left over. So I cut off my zipper tape where it's extended there. You can see here, it doesn't go all the way to the edge. I'm about 1/2 inch from the edge, but I've gone just beyond where it folded over. So now when I unfold everything, the raw edge of that binding is going to be tucked in underneath. But before I do that, I need to trim off the extra. So I'm taking my scissors and I'm cutting just the binding. I've used this trim on many other things, I did a headband a few years ago, an ear warmer headband out of 2 layers of polar fleece, and I used this method to trim the edges, but you can see that it gives it a lovely edge on both sides. And so I'll give it a bit of a steam with the iron, pressing it downward, but now you can see there's no visible seam at all. And that's how I did it. All that's left now is to top stitch beside my zipper. So once all this gets tucked in and trimmed, I'm going to stitch it from the right side so that just the zipper teeth are showing. I'll put a few pins in to hold it steady, and then my jacket's done. So I'm back. I thought I was done, but something came up that I wanted to show you. So at where the hemband joins onto the body, it's a really thick spot. And so I use a little thing that Husqvarna Viking calls a button reed, and I call it a hump jumper because I need it to get up over this hump. So I'm going to sew until I get close, and then I'm going to stop with my needle down. I'm going to insert this tool at the back. You can see it's got a little space for me to sew in between the legs. And I'm putting it in there so that it's just bumping up against the hump. And then I'm going to sew until I'm just ready to come off the hump. Again, I'm stopping with my needle down. My presser foot is up. I'm putting this now in front, and I'm going to sew. But maybe I'm not. There's too much fabric under the presser foot. It doesn't like it. All right, let's try this way. Okay, touch my message on my screen. A little bit more. And there we go. We're down off the hump. And that's what I wanted to show you. Now I am done.